ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على سيدنا ورسوله وخاتم الأنبياء وعلى آله الأزكياء وأصحابه الأتقياء أما بعد اللهم إنا نسألك حبك وحب من يحبك وحب عمل يقربنا إلى حبك. Oh Allah, we ask for your love, the love of the actions that you love and the love of the people that you love. Alright, welcome back everybody to the Peace Be Upon Him series. And if you missed last week, we covered what did we cover last week? Not last week, 2 weeks ago, sorry. Last week we covered Hispanics and Islam. The week before that, what did we talk about? The birth. Who said that? Abdul Malik is always answering. Him or Abdul Samad, they're always answering, mashallah. Or Ayman. We gotta switch it up. You guys are not allowed to answer today. Abdul Samad, Abdul Malik, and Ayman. No replies from you today, please. Thank you. Just mental notes for next time, inshallah. You guys get a break today. A break. So, we talked about the birth of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And we covered the miracles that were related around the birth, right, of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So, who can give me one of those miracles? I need one from the brothers, one from the sisters. Yes.
The fall of the Persian temple or something.
Yes, the shaking of the Persian temple, right? The shaking of the Persian temple. Abdul Samad, you're on a break today. You're on overtime. We can't pay you extra. One from the sisters, please. I'm sorry, I can't see your hands up.
The fire went out.
Of who?
The fire that people used to worship.
The fire that people used to worship, the fire that the Majus used to worship, went out, that flame. They used to put so much effort to keep this flame alive, right? So they can constantly worship the fire. The day the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was born, this fire went out. Now scholars say this could mean literally or it could be figuratively, right? Figuratively as in that the light of Islam has came and has taken over and that fire had went out in that sense. Literally that it actually went out, that it actually happened. Wallahu a'lam. Doesn't add anything to the story, doesn't take away anything from the story. But what did we end up on? What did we leave? Or what did we stop on last time? We talked about the nurse mothers of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Okay? You're on break, remember. We talked about the nurse mothers of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And there was 3 of them we talked about. Who was the first one? All the answers have to come from the sisters this time. Amina, who is? That is his, everybody can answer this, his mother. Amina is the first one. The second one is Thuwaybah, who is also known as, actually wait, before I say this. We have Thuwaybah and Halima Sadiya. Yes, Thuwaybah, who's also known as, we name her as Ummu Ayman, right? And she was also from Habasha. And then we have Halima Sadiya, right? So his mother only breastfed him for just a couple days. قبل أن تقدم حليمة السعدية وكانت قد أرضعت قبله حمزة. Who is his? Hamza was his uncle. Hamza radiallahu anhu was his uncle. So, today we're going to talk about Halima Sadiya. Now, I want to see, who knows this story? I feel like many of us, when we studied Seerah, growing up, we briefed over it, we touched over it. The story of Halima Sadiya, right? And to me, this is one of the most beautiful and remarkable stories, especially when you dive in detail when it comes down to Halima Sadiya. A very, very beautiful story in regards to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And I think we should just get started into it, honestly. So, she was, well, actually, before I ask this, or before I get into it, what is the theme of this story? If you know this story and you've read it or heard about it, what's the theme? The general theme of this story. If you were to describe it in one or two words, what's the general theme? قصة حليمة السعدية. What is the theme of the story of Halima Sadiya? Just think about whatever you can. For those who have, this is kind of a test to see if you guys know a little bit of seerah or not. If you pay attention to any small details. What's a theme? Give me some words.
I'd say the blessings, the barakah of the Prophet.
The blessings and the barakah of the Prophet Muhammedﷺ. That's a great theme, and we're going to touch on that.
His righteousness.
His righteousness from a young age. We're going to touch on that. What's a big event that happened during this period?
Opening his chest.
The opening of his chest, right? What else? What else? There's something you guys are missing, and it's something we experience in our life. Every single person here experiences this.
No one accepted the Prophet because he was orphan.
No one accepted the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ because he's an orphan. Have we all experienced that? No, but what have we experienced? Rejection. Every single person in this room has experienced some type of rejection. And what I really want to, I'm looking over my notes and I was kind of formulating this, and I have this written in my notes, and it's very beautiful. I wrote down, don't be impacted by what people think of you, and this is how you deal with rejection, right? And don't be discouraged because people judge you on a different scale than what you want them to judge you on. What it means is that you can't be impacted by people not recognizing your value. Like, for example, the simplest example. Let's say we're all going to meet up to play soccer, right? And then there's two team captains and people are picking, and then you always have that one person that's always picked last, right? You always have that one person picked last. That's tough. Especially as a kid, to deal with that, that's tough, right? And just cause, hear me out, just cause you don't meet the beauty standards, the strength standards, the height standards, whatever it is that social media imposes or that other people think, don't feel bad because people skipped over you, because we're going to find out in this story that 99% of people skipped over the best person to walk on the face of this earth, Muhammadﷺ. Don't feel bad because you've been rejected or you've been overlooked, because we come to find out that 99% of people that approach Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's family rejected them. We don't want this child. You keep him. Naam? Why? Because they're judging him of their values and their standards. What does that mean? Your values and your standards don't mean anything to me. I have my standards as a Muslim, which are my base value standards, and then on top of that we can get into the micro standards as well. And this is why I love the story of Halima Sadiya, because it teaches us how to deal with rejection. It teaches us in this story, how can we deal with rejection as human beings? People won't value you because they're not using the same standard as you. For example, here's a perfect example. Someone who's a hafiz, someone who's memorized Quran. To us in this masjid, to us as a community, we value this person. He holds a lot of value to us because he can be an imam, he can be a leader, he can teach children. Naam, we value this person. But take that same exact person and take him into Yale. Tell me how many professors at Yale will value this person. Nobody's going to value him. Why? Because their standard and their meters of valuing somebody is different. So that value is not the same. But should that person feel any less because they're a hafiz? Should they feel undervalued because they're a hafiz and some non-Muslims are not valuing them? No, right? And this is the perfect example. So I love this story, and let's dive deep into the story of Halima Sadiya, right? And this is narrated by Halima Sadiya herself. And you can find this narration in a kitab called Al-Lu'lu' al-Maknoon. A book called Al-Lu'lu' al-Maknoon. Right? You can find this narration here. And here's what she says. تذكر حليمة قصة رضاعة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فتقول, Halima recalls the story of her nursing and taking care of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and she says, خرجت من بلدها مع زوجها. Right? خرجت من بلدها مع زوجها. She left from the land which was Banu Sa'ad that she was staying in with her husband. But before we talk about this, we talked about before, why do these people come from outside of Mecca to come take care and raise these kids that are living in Mecca? Why is that a thing?
To teach them
You're on overtime. You're on overtime.
Bedouin values.
What is that? Who said that?
Bedouin values.
Bedouin values. True values of being a Bedouin and living in the desert, and core Arab values. Number one. Number two, why else do they take kids? Why else do they take kids out of Mecca? Why do the parents give their kids away? Sickness, plagues happening around Mecca. Mecca is a very busy city. Busy city. People are coming from all over the world. And there was a plague going around that would kill young children. So parents would be like, hey, take my child, take care of him 2-3 years, bring him back to me once they're built up and things like that. They also go out so they can learn how to horseback ride and get stronger. And we talked about the values last time, remember? We talked about the values of being raised up in nature. What it does. Being raised up in nature versus a kid who's raised up in an inner city type of style. And the values and how it impacts. Right? And this is not things that we get from facts that I'm coming out from the Sunnah. These are facts that psychologists and scientists have said in the 21st century why it's important to raise kids and have your kids around nature. Why it's important to raise them in that environment, right? So 21st century science is proving that this was a good concept, to raise your kids outside, to teach them these kind of values. They become stronger, smarter, they pay attention more. They're more sociable, right? Than kids who are sitting on their iPads in the inner city all day long. You can actually have a conversation. And that's why the Arabs back then, they used to mature so much quicker. Because of the environment they were in, right? The weather played a role. So they used to do that. They used to give their kids away. So people would come every year to come adopt these kids. And in order for you to do that, it's like a daycare. You got to pay me. You got to pay. I'm taking care of your kid. I have to feed him. I have to take care of them. I have to look after them. They're young children. Right? So you have to pay me in order for me to take care of your kid. So by default, if you're going to come into town, you're going to go look for who? The rich. You're going to look for the ones that have the capabilities and the abilities to pay the money so you can take care of their children. So the earlier you got there, the better for you. First come, first serve type basis. Naam? So Halima Sadiya says, خرجت من بلدها مع زوجها. She left from Banu Sa'ad with her husband, right? وابن لها صغير. And there was a young boy with her that she was still breastfeeding. She was still nursing. One of her own children. نعم. And في نسوة من بني سعد بن بكر. With a group of other women. And they were all coming from Bani Sa'ad to go to where? To go to Mecca. And she says, تلتمس الرضاعة بمكة. She says all of them are looking for rida'a in Mecca, looking to find these children to nurse. قالت, for what? Why are they doing this? Is it for free? For money. So she says, وذلك في سنة شهباء. And during this year it was a drought, dry, very, very dry. لم تبقى لنا شيئا. Nothing was, basically what she's trying to say is we're broke. We don't got no money. So we need this job. Right? قالت فخرجت على آتان. What's an atan? Who said it? Atan. What's an atan? A donkey, a mule. Right? That's an atan. She says, so I left with on my mule, on my donkey, right? And this donkey, li qamra'a, the color of it kind of looked like a moon style color, a whitish color, grayish color. وَمَعَنَا شَارِفٌ. Sharifun is a camel. Sharifun lana. Wallahi ma tabiddu biqatratin. She says that this camel, useless. No, we just travel on it, but it wouldn't give us any milk. Useless, right? And she's saying, wallahi, like this is value to the Arabs, right? Like this, but she said we took it with us just in case. Put some stuff on it for the road, for traveling, right? وَمَا نَنَامُ لَيْلَنَا أَجْمَعَ مِنْ صَبِيِّنَا الَّذِي مَعَنَا. She says, and we wouldn't sleep all night because our kid would cry from hunger all night. We can't get a good continuous sleep all night, right? And it's terrible. You know, alhamdulillah, one of my sisters just had a baby last month. She stayed with us for a little bit, right? The kid has lungs, mashallah, tabarak. He can scream all night. And it's like a timer. You know, 11 p.m. comes, boom, something's happening. He changes.
Night shift.
Night shift, exactly, right? I hear him all the way downstairs through the vents. I just hear him right here in my ear, screaming all night. And I sit there, and when I was reading this, and literally, as I was writing my notes today, the first person I thought it was my sister. I was like, the sleepless nights a mother has to go through because of the child. And what are you going to do, just sleep it off? Even if you wanted to, you couldn't, right? Even if you wanted to, you couldn't, subhanallah. So she says, we haven't been able to get a good night's sleep. من بكائه من الجوع, because he was so hungry. وما في ثدي مما يغنيه. And she says that there is nothing in my chest that I can give to him. Nothing. I can't feed him. Why? Because we're in a drought. I'm not nourished. I don't have enough food. So by default, I can't feed my child. So therefore, we're just stuck in the cycle of my child crying all night. There's nothing I can do about it. Right? وَمَا فِي شَارِفِنَا. And in our camel, our useless camel, nothing, right? مَا يُغَذِّيهِ وَلَكِنَّ كُنَّا نَرْجُو الْغَيْثِ. The important part. She says, and our camel had nothing to give or feed. وَلَكِنَّ كُنَّا نَرْجُو الْغَيْثِ. But through all of this, we were optimistic. We had hope. We had hope. And my message here for you and for myself, how optimistic versus how pessimistic are we in these type of situations? Look at this woman who's going through a drought, her and her family. And she's admitting, you know how much courage it takes to admit that I'm broke? That I don't have money? She says there's nothing. There's nothing. How much courage does that take? Plus our camel doesn't give anything. I can't even feed my own child. Through all of this, despite everything I'm going through, we are still very hopeful. Naturally, I feel like as human beings, we're very pessimistic. We're always looking at the worst of things. Especially when things change in our lives and they don't change for the good. Especially when things start going bad. Especially when business starts to dip and you don't know what to do. Now you're worried.
Now it's opposite.
It's
Brother have everything and he will be like, I don't have anything. No job.
SubhanAllah, and you'll see, that's the beautiful part. There's people that have everything and they're still complaining and pessimistic. They have the roof over their head, they have the job, they have the car. Alhamdulillah, they're living comfortable, but still complaining. And then you see a woman in Gaza who's standing there, her children are dead in front of her, and she says, Ya Allah, take from us hatta darda. Go ahead, take as much blood as you want from us, Ya Allah, until you're pleased. Her home is destroyed. Her children are gone. Her family is gone. People are getting slaughtered left and right. And she says, Ya Allah, keep taking until you're pleased. That's all I care about. If you're pleased, I'm pleased. But then one little thing goes wrong in my life, and I become so pessimistic. I start looking at all the negative outcomes and thinking that my life is the worst. When in reality, I have everything. And Halima Sadiya here is telling you that I'm in drought. We don't have food, we don't have money. But she says, وَلَكِنَّ كُنَّا نَرْجُو الْغَيْثِ. But still, through all of this, despite all of this, I am hopeful. I am hopeful there's going to be a good outcome, right? Nothing's going good for her, but she's like, I'm going to thug it out. It's going to be all right. I'm going to figure this out. That's the state that she's in, right? So she says, فَخَرَجْتُ عَلَىٰ آتَانِ, right? So we went out on my mule. فَلَقَدْ آدَمْتُ الرَّكْبَ حَتَّى شَقَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ ضَعْفًا وَعَجْفًا. She says, so I went out on my mule with a caravan. And my mule, basically in today's term, car kept breaking down. My car needed an oil change, my car kept breaking down. So my mule is holding back who? The caravan that needs to keep going forward. So I kept falling behind. I became a burden on the rest of the crew. I became a burden. Like they can't keep waiting for me. They can't keep waiting for me. Na'am. حتى قدمنا مكة. And she says, finally we got to Mecca. نلتمس الرضاعة. Looking for these children so we can nurse them. Right? فما منا امرأة إلا وقد عرض عليها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فتأباه. She says there hasn't been a woman that walked into Mecca that day that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to was presented to her and she rejected him. Out of all the women who came, and she rejected him. إذا قيل لها أنه يتيم. The minute they tell him that he's an orphan, they say, no, we're good. We're good off that. He's an orphan? Nah. Grandfather, no father in the picture, just a mom, probably no money. You keep him. She said there wasn't that woman. That means 100% of the women that came, they rejected him. Including who? Including Halima Sadiya. She admits herself that I was one of those women who rejected him. I'm not doing this. People could not see the value of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Same with us when we get rejected, when we don't make it to the school we want to go to, when we get rejected for that marriage proposal, when we get rejected for the job that we want. People aren't seeing the value in you. So therefore, you get rejected because people aren't noticing your value. You may not get that job. You may not get that, school that you really wanted to go to for law school or medical school or whatever it is. And you're going to keep getting rejected. Because these people are not seeing your value. These people are not seeing you and how valuable you are. Look at this. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ kept getting rejected. And that's okay. That's completely fine. Rejection is a part of life. People have different standards. And that's normal. You have to stop looking at their standards is the most important part. You can't keep looking at these people's standards. Why? Because you have to worry about what's your standard. What's my standard? And of course, as Muslims, we have, like I said, a baseline standard. We have a baseline standard that we need in our lives. Salah, zakah, Sawm, Hajj, right? We have these standards and believing in Allah, in His oneness. These are our standards and our baselines as Muslims. But then we also have micro standards for ourselves. And you can't let social media or whatever it is tell you what your worth is. Because people will reject the greatest person who ever walked on this earth, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he got rejected. Every single woman who came into that town to nurse him rejected him. Every single woman. You think we're definitely going to get rejected. 110%, right? But it's all right. This is society. And if this is how they want to see it, let them see it. But I know my value and I know my strength and I know what I'm capable of. Right? So, she continues on and she says, وَذَلِكَ أَنَّا إِنَّمَا كُنَّا نَرْجُو الْمَعْرُوفَ مِنْ أَبِي الصَّبِيِّ, right? فَكُنَّا نَقُولْ يَتِيم. Once we found out that he was, that his father wasn't around, we're not gonna get a payment from this child. So we all said, yatim. وَمَا عَسَى أن تصنع أمه وجده. And what's his father or what's his grandfather and his mother going to present to us? What do they have to offer to us? Right? فما بقيت امرأة قدمت معي إلا أخذت رضيعا غيري. She says there hasn't been a woman that was left in here goes Abdurrahman. She says there isn't a woman that came with us that didn't leave with a child. Every single woman who came with her left with a child except me. This is what Halima Sadiya is saying. So again, the question I'm going to ask everybody, what is the theme here? How does she feel? What's going on in her head and in her heart right now? What's Halima Sadiya feeling today?
Desperate.
Desperate? What else? Rejection? Great. What else? These are all correct. I'm not looking for a specific answer, by the way. These all, keep going. She can't go back without nothing, right? She feels desperate. She feels the rejection. What else? What's the overall theme? Everybody's giving me one-word answers. What's the overall theme? It's okay to speak in sentences
You
sometimes.
just gotta take him.
You're on overtime. He's been working off the clock. Answers every question, mashallah alayh. I need other people to interact. I'm going to start pointing fingers. What's the overall theme here? Just summarize it for me. No, you can't say Abdul Malik. Money, but we're giving one-word replies here. What is she feeling?
Doesn't feel included.
She doesn't keep going. We're speaking in sentences now. Alhamdulillah, we improved from one word. You know, she doesn't feel included. Keep going. You're on the right path. Hamza, finish what your cousin had started.
I was thinking like having trust in unknown.
Having trust in the unknown.
Yeah.
Because she was very hopeful at first.
Yeah.
Here's what when I was gathering this. If I was Halima Sadiya and I just pulled up to Mecca, right? I've already had a terrible journey. It's been hard for me to even get here. Car kept breaking down, right? And now all that's left for me is this child who's an orphan. And I'm not about to get paid off of this. I don't got money. Everybody's gone. Nobody's left. All the women got what they wanted, except me. So why me? Why am I stuck in this position? She probably feels like, here's what I came up with. She probably feels like that she has to settle. Or she's being deprived, harman. Right? Like the blessings were taken away from her. And then what would I do in that situation? Well, only if we left earlier, and only if we didn't have this bungle donkey, and only if we didn't have a camel that didn't feed us, and only if this child would stop crying at night, maybe we would have been here on time, maybe we would have gotten a child that their family could have paid. Pessimistic. A bunch of maybes and a bunch of ifs that never happened. I'm saying this is what I would do. If I was Halima, this is what I would do. And this is what would be going on in my head. Right? I want you guys, when we're talking about the seerah, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of every single person we talk about. Because every single person we're talking about played a very key and important role in the Prophet Muhammad's life. And they were directly impacted by his life. So you have to put yourself in their shoes. You have to feel what they're feeling. If you truly want to reap the benefits out of this. Naam? So she says, I'm not feeling this. Right? But coming, just reflecting everything we talk about here. I'm not here to tell you the seerah just so you can learn, oh, I learned about the Prophet. Yay, he got Halima Sadiya, took care of him. He went home to his mother. He became a prophet. Great story. But when we learn about these things, it's about what? Reflecting. How can we connect with our day-to-day life? This is the important part of everything. How can I connect to this story of Halima? What can I learn from Halima Sadiya? And for me, what I gather is, this happens in our life. We feel like every door has been closed on us. I feel like that this door has closed on me and this door has closed on me and all the options I had are not there anymore. So I'm going to start to lose hope and I'm going to start to complain. But the beautiful part about this is Allah is like, you don't see this? Yeah, I closed the door. You're not looking at the bigger picture though. Yes, I closed the door for you. But just wait for what's coming next. Just wait for what I'm about to do for you. In our minds, we're like, man, the door's closed. In my mind, I can't do anything about it. In my mind, I'm fully desperate. I'm very desperate in my mind. But what I got coming is going to be way better. But here's the thing. Allah is telling us you have to be ready for that door. You got to be willing to take the step and open that door so those blessings can come. Even though every door has been closed on you, you still cannot lose hope. You have to be willing to go open a door, not wait for a door to open for you. And that's exactly what Halima Sadiya did here, right? And wait till you experience this, and one day you're going to have this type of experience, and bam, that's your Halima moment in your life. You look back at it when all these doors have been closed on you, and then something amazing opens up, that's your Halima moment. That's how you can relate to Halima Sadiya radiallahu anha. This is how you can have a connection with the Prophet Muhammad and Halima Sadiya. So she says, she continues on and she says, every woman, right? And she says that, فَلَمَّا أَجْمَعْنَا الْإِنْطِلَاقِ وَالذِّهَابِ, she says, we got ready to go home. قُلْتُ لِصَاحِبِي, I said to my husband, وَاللَّهِ إِنِّي لَأَكْرَهُ أَنْ أَرْجَعَ مِنْ بَيْنِ صَوَاحِبِ. Right? وَلَمْ آخُذُ رَضِيعًا. She says, I would hate for me to go back home in front of my friends and we're the only ones that didn't have an orphan to bring, or that didn't have a baby to take back. I would hate for that to be us. When everybody got a child to take back and they're getting paid for it, we're the only ones. She's like, nah, I'm not doing it. You know what we call this? What do we call this? Like everybody having babies, baby fever. Everybody got babies. I want a baby. Right? I need to fit in. I need to be a part of this. So she says, وَاللَّهِ لَأَذْهَبَنَّ إِلَى ذَلِكَ الْيَتِيمِ فَلَأَخُذَنَّهُ. She says, I'm going to go back to that orphan. So what? I'm not even looking at the money. At this point, it's about my image. I got to make sure I don't look bad in front of everybody. I got to have something too. It's about my image. So I'm going to go back. This is what her husband says. قَالَ, her husband says, لَا عَلَيْكَ أَن تَفْعَلِ. There's no problem with doing that. We should take him. عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَجْعَلَ لَنَا فِيهِ بَرَكَةً. Again, optimism. Being super optimistic about every situation. You know what? This isn't the job I wanted. I'm going to have to settle for this job in the meantime, but you never know where it's going to take me. You never know what's going to happen after here. لَعَلَّ, or he says, عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَجْعَلَ لَنَا فِيهِ بَرَكَةً. Maybe, who knows? Maybe there's going to be barakah in it. Yeah, all the outliers, everything from A to Z on the resume is telling me this. This is like a bad situation. When I'm reading this, I'm like, you're broke, your family's broke, you don't got any money, and you're in a drought, you don't even have enough to feed your own child, and yet you're going to take another child who's also broke. You're taking on more responsibility. The math is not working right now. It's not mathing. It's not fitting together. 1 + 1 is not 2 in this situation. Why would you ever take that responsibility? You're already struggling. So you're going to add more bills? You're going to add more problems to your life? This is the elephant in the room to me when I'm reading this. Like, why would you ever do that? Right? And again, يَجْعَلْ لَنَا فِيهِ بَرَكَةً. This is the positive side. This is the beautiful part of looking at the positive thing of everything. When you have a death in the family, you got to look at the positive. When you get rejected, you got to look at the positive. You don't know what Allah, when you have hope in Allah, this is one of the core things as Muslims that we need to have, is having husn al-dhan, is having good assumptions of Allah. The beautiful, beautiful hadith Qudsi, where the Prophet ﷺ talks about a man who's crossing a sirat. What's a sirat? It's like basically a line. The Prophet ﷺ said it's thin as a hair and sharp as a sword. On the Day of Judgment, we're going to have to pass this. We got to get on this line that's thin as a hair, sharp as a sword, and you're going to have to walk across. What's across? Jannah. What's under you? Jahannam. And a man will walk on this on the Day of Judgment. And he will start to lose his balance left and right. And it will start to fall into Jahannam. Mid-fall, as he's falling into Jahannam, he starts to scream and shout and he says, I had so much hope in my Lord that He was going to save me. I had so much hope in my Lord that He was going to save me. Why? Because He's the most merciful. That's all I've learned in my life. He's the most forgiving. I had so much hope. Allah will hear this and He will send malaika directly to him. He say, pick this man up and take him straight to Jannah. Why? Because of husnul dhan. Having that optimism. I'm not the perfect Muslim. I mess up every single day. I do things I shouldn't do. We've all fallen into things that we shouldn't be doing. We're not perfect. But at the end of the night when I fall asleep, I make my repentance, I make my tawbah, I make sure it's sincere. And above all, I have so much hope in my Lord that He will be there for me. And just like He saved me from a million other situations that I could have went bad in, I know He's going to save me when it matters the most. The mindset, optimism. And this is exactly what the husband of Halima Sadiya is practicing here. Yeah, the odds are against us. We're broke. We don't have any money. Our camel can't suffice us. Our child is hungry. But you know what? Maybe Allah will put barakah in this child. Who knows? Right? And you notice that sometimes. You know, you'll have some people tell you, I'm going to start a business. Right? And I experienced this myself. You know, I go up to my parents, I have an idea, I want to start a business. Why would you do that? You're an engineer. You're wasting your time. You're going to lose money. Why would you start a business? Are you in your right mind? But the hard part that people struggle saying is, may Allah put barakah in it. Let me know what you need. Hopefully your business becomes successful. The optimism piece of it. We're missing that in our day-to-day lives. And throughout the story of Halima Sadiya, we learn how to deal with rejection and we learn to keep optimism throughout our lives in every scenario that we go through. Even when all the odds are against us. Right? So, her husband is supporting her. He's like, yeah, go ahead. Do it. And maybe Allah will put barakah in him. Words are so powerful. You have to speak good in your life. Speaking good in your life is very important. Basically, speak it into existence. Speak it into existence. So Halima Sadiya says, she said, I went back and I got him. قالت فلما أخذته رجعت به إلى رحلي. I went back to my caravan. فلما وضعته في حجري, and when I put him on my lap, أقبل عليه ثدايا بما شاء من لبن. She says, the minute I put him on my lap and I wanted to nurse him, he started to drink. And she said, I thought that was weird. Because the night before I tried to feed my younger son, my other baby, and nothing happened. She said he started to drink. فَشَرِبَ حَتَّى رَوِيَ. He drank till he was full. Till he was sufficed. Till he was satiated. A beautiful point that one of my teachers, Sheikh Mikhail Smith, he talks about this word, rawiya. And as a student of knowledge, which all of you are, where we hear that word? There's another version of this word we hear. Rawiya. Think about it when you're reading hadith. Rawa al-Bukhari, Rawa Muslim. It's a what? Narration. It's a, why was this word used for narration when it truly means to be full and satiated? Why was this word used? My Sheikh Mikhail Smith, he says, we use this word, the scholars, the Arabic scholars use this word for a hadith. Why? Because once you read a hadith, it's supposed to give you that feeling of satiation because you're learning knowledge. Just like when you eat food and you become full, now you're satiated, it becomes sufficient for you. He says when you read hadith that are sahih, authentic, with pure narration, they're supposed to comfort you and give you that same exact feeling. They're quenching your thirst. Which I found was very, very beautiful to have this connection. And she says he drank till he was full. وَشَرِبْ مَعَهُ أَخُوهُ حَتَّى رَوِيَ. And not just him, he wasn't the only one who drank till he was full. Even his little brother, which is his brother by nursing, right? Also drank till he was full. ثُمَّ نَامَ وَمَا كُنَّا نَنَامُ مَعَهُ قَبْلَ ذَلِكَ. And she said that till they both slept, and we slept with them, and we haven't slept like that before. First night she has this little baby. And keep in mind, it hasn't hit Halima Sadiya yet. She doesn't realize who she has with her. Right? It hasn't hit her just yet that this little baby has a lot of barakah. It hasn't hit. Right? So focus on the barakah here. And she's like, not only was he full, but the baby was full. وَقَامَ زَوْجِي. And my husband got up, إِلَى شَارِفِنَا. And my husband went to our camel. فَإِذَا هِيَ حَافِلٌ. She's full of milk. Our camel's full of milk. When yesterday our camel was dry, nothing. Today full of milk. فَحَلَبَ مِنْهَا وَشَرِبَ. So he went and he got some milk and he drank. And she said, وَشَرِبْتُ مَعَهُ حَتَّى انْتَهَيْنَا رِيًّا وَشَبِعْنَا. Until we both got full. And not just, riyan is like, like you fill it to the brim, like full. Full tank. We drank. Right? فَبِتْنَا بِخَيْرِ لَيْلَةٍ. She said, we had the best night. We had a great night that night. We fell asleep and we had so much comfort throughout our night. قالت. يقول صاحبي, my husband said to me, حين أصبحنا, when we got up, تعلمي والله يا حليمة. He said, oh Halima, do you know, لقد أخذت نسمة مباركة. She says, do you know, her husband is reminding her in the morning, she says, do you know that we just took a very blessed soul with us? He's observant. What we got on our hands is something very, very special, ya Halima. Right? فقلت والله إني لأرجو ذلك. قالت فذهبت إليه فأخذته. So this is what she's saying. She said, she's going back. She said, I'm so happy. I'm glad that I went back and I took him. I took this baby with me. Right? The barakah, when they took this young child, was immediate. No delay. No turbo lag on the barakah. Right? Immediate. Electric car, you floor it, goes. Just like when you charge your phone, it starts charging. Right? Immediate barakah. This is when Abdurrahman starts to focus. I said turbo lag. So she says, قالت ثم خرجنا وركبت آتاني. She says, I put him with me. She says, I put him with me on my mule. وحملته عليها معي. And I made sure Muhammad was so close to me. I picked him up and I got to make sure he's with me. Protect this child at all costs. We're getting money now. Right? Protect this child. She's like, I'll put him on my donkey. I wouldn't let him go on the camel. I wouldn't let him travel with my husband. He stays with me. Right? فوالله لقطعت بالركب ما يقدر عليها شيء من حمرهم حتى إن صواحبي ليقولن لي يا ابنة أبي ذويب ويحك اربعي علينا. She says that when I got on, everybody in the caravan, I was slowing them down. My car was broke down. But on the way back, I'm zooming. I'm cutting up between them. I'm now ahead.
Putting torque over there.
Yeah, torque, turbo lag, nothing is there. Just straight go. Pedal to the metal. Right? On a stock G80. She had a stock mule. Right? So she says, my friends would tell me. He said, my friends would tell me, Yabnata Abi Dhuwayb. They're calling me, they're screaming to me. She says, is this the same donkey you came with? You sure you didn't do a downpipe back there? You didn't tune this car? You didn't do anything different? You didn't buy a new one? Is this the same donkey? Right? And she says, yeah, this is the same one. They're asking her, أَلَيْسَتَ هَذِهِ آتَانِكَ الَّتِي كُنْتِ خَرَجْتُ عَلَيْهَا? Is this the same one? فأقول لهن بلى والله, yeah, it's the same one. إنها لهي. فيقولن والله إن لها لشأن. Something's up with it. Something is wrong with this donkey. It's not operating normal. Right? It's not working correctly. نعم. And she continues, قالت ثم قدمنا منازلنا. And she said, we got to our land من بلاد بني سعد, in the area we used to stay in. وما أعلم أرضا من أرض الله أجدب. She says, there wasn't a land that I know that was more dry than this land. Very, very dry. فنحلب ونشرب. But she says, despite that, we were eating and drinking just fine when we brought Muhammad back home with us, عليه الصلاة والسلام. وما يحلب إنسانا قطرة لبن. And she says, no one else from our village is able to get a single drop of milk except us. Except our animals are bringing us all the milk. And we're able to eat. And all the land around us was dry except our land. It's not dry. ولا يجدها في ضرع. And they would try to go everywhere. حتى كان الحاضرون من قومنا, even until the people around the village would say, يقولون لرعيانهم, they would say to the people that are grazing the sheep, ويلكم اسرحوا حيث يسرح راعي بنت أبي ذويب. So he says, hey, go with their sheep. Something's up with their sheep. Make sure they're telling all the sheep herders, make sure you follow her sheep. Because they must be going off into some strange place. Make sure you follow her sheep. Because whatever they're getting, we're not getting. But this is all from the barakah of the Prophet Muhammad as such a young child. And a baby at such a young age. Right? And she said despite that, they would go. Right? And they would go and try to follow, and still only our sheep would come back with milk. And theirs would be dry, as if they were there before. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. Right? This is the beautiful barakah of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And he stays with her for 2 years. He stays with her for 2 years. In this period, he stays with her 2 years. Now, after 2 years, it's time to take him back to his mother. It's time to take Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to his mother. Approximately, he's about 4 years old at this point. After these 2 years have passed. It's time to take him back. Halima Sadiya is not trying to do that. Halima Sadiya does not want to take him back to his mother. Because she's seeing the blessings of this young boy. There's a weaker narration where Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, one day it was hot. Halima Sadiya says, it's a weak narration, so take it with a grain of salt. Halima Sadiya says, one day it was super hot outside. Very hot. Middle of the Meccan desert. And she says, all the kids, when it gets super hot in the sun, zawal al-shams, it's right above their heads, they run back inside the house to cool off. She says, one day Muhammad ﷺ didn't come back. And we're freaking out. Little 3-4-year-old boy, where's Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? Where is this little boy at? So she asks his sister, where's your brother? She said, I left him outside. Where'd you leave him? Out in the lands. Let's go look for him. We go out to look for him and we find Muhammad ﷺ sitting down, laying down in the grass, or not in the grass, in the hot sand, with his hands like this. The sun is above his head, and there's a little cloud covering him, shading him. And she's sitting there and she's saying, this is very, very strange. And we later on, when we study the seerah, we're going to come to find out that there's clouds following him every time he travels. When he goes to Sham later on, the servant of Khadija, Maysara, is that his name, Maysara? I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Forgive me. But it's, I believe it's Maysara. When he was traveling, the servant of Khadija, and he said, I would observe this guy. Walking in the desert, trekking between Mecca and...
I think it was Zayd who,
He wasn't the servant of Khadija though. Zayd ibn, I'm going to find this. I'm not going to rest till I find this. Who can tell me? It's not Wahshi. Wahshi was the one who killed Hamza. I think it was Maysara.
You're right, you're right.
Yeah? You got a narration to back that up? Sheikh Google. MashaAllah. Where is it? Here it is. 25 من عمرة المباركة. So Khadija تستأجر الرجال في مالها وتضاربهم. She would give them commission. So yeah, ميسرة. فخرج الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم في ماله وخرج معه غلامها ميسرة وجعل عمومتها يوصون به أهل العلم. So yes, his name was Maysara. His name was Maysara. Is a narration that Ali ibn Abi Talib will say later on in his life. So his name was Maysara. And he even himself said, he said, I started, when Khadija is a single woman at this time, radiallahu anha, and she's sending out, she's not going to travel. So what she does is she has a lot of money and she wants to invest the money, right? A boss lady, she's trying to invest the money. So what Khadija does is she has her servant Maysara, and she finds trustworthy men in Mecca, in Quraysh, and she says, hey, if you go sell me this stuff and you make a profit, I give you commission. And you come back with the goods, right? So she's hearing about the status of Prophet Muhammad a little bit here, and she sees that he's a good man, mashallah, tabarak rahman, and he's, has a good reputation, comes from a good family. She said, well, okay, why don't we try this guy out? So she sends him out, and whoever she sends out, she tells Maysara, pay close attention. Make sure this person is not stealing from us. Make sure whoever we send out is not, taking any money from us. Make sure that they're not taking any goods from us. Make sure that they're, maximizing the profits to the best of their abilities. So you just keep an eye out, Don't let them do something left or right, when they're walking in the desert to go to Asham, you're walking behind them. They stay in front of you, right? So Maysara would say later on, he said, I would watch this man and keep a close eye on him, and I'd be walking, sweating in the middle of the desert. The sun is hitting me. This man is walking about 20, 30 feet in front of me, and he's shaded, not a single drop of sweat, right? So there's these miracles that happen throughout his life before prophethood, alayhi salam, that are a testimony to his prophethood. Naam. So these are some things that we will cover later on in the story, but Halima Sadiya now, she's at a point where she's ready to give him back, or she's not ready to give him back, but the 2 years is up, she has to give him back. So we'll come back next week and see what happens with Halima Sadiya and the mother of the Prophet ﷺ, Amina, who has missed her son for the last 2 years, and she's ready to see her boy, right? And what happens in this situation. Jazakumullah khair. What kind of questions do we have today? Yes, Hamza.
What was Halima's origins?
As far as I know, she's from Bani Sa'd. Does anybody else know? She's considered as an Arab, like a Bedouin Arab.
Yeah. Just because I know, because obviously Islam hasn't been brought down yet by the time that story was taking place, and she's saying Wallahi and...
So yeah, that's a very good thing. Actually, when you're studying the seerah, you'll notice that it's a normal thing. You have to realize, the Arabs of Quraysh, their aqidah, for the most part, was pretty solid. But the biggest issue in the one issue, but it's the biggest issue in their aqidah, is idolatry. Sanam. They believe that they know that this sanam, is not Allah. They understood that. But for many of them, some of them did believe that the sun, there is some that worshipped it solely. But they believed that worshipping the sun will get them closer to Allah. Which is why they still used to do Hajj. Hajj was still a thing during the time of al-Jahiliyyah. Right? Going to worship and do tawaf was a thing. People would travel from all over the Arab Peninsula to do it. Right? And the thing is, Arabs, this is an oath to them. Wallahi, that's an oath. Right? And we talked about why Arabs were chosen, why Quraysh specifically was chosen, because they don't go back on their word. Nah? So it's very interesting when you're studying, you kind of have to balance out like, okay, these people aren't Muslim, but they're doing things that we kind of do, and they're saying things that we kind of say. So how do we balance the two?
That makes sense.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great point of discussion. Yes, Abdul Malik. Oh yeah, you guys are off OT now.
Okay. Does that also count for the names that people had, like Abdul or all those before?
100%. And even last time we talked about that Ibn Ishaq, when he looked into the history. Ibn Ishaq is one of the famous narrators of Sirah. He says Muhammad wasn't the first person to be named that. He was the first person maybe in Quraysh to be named that. But based on history, they were able to find 15 other names in the Arab Peninsula, based on history, that were also named Muhammad. It was just not a common name. It's just not normal to name something like that. It's like you go in the Middle East, and actually I'm not even going to make this connection. Forget about it.
You're doing good on the analogy.
No. This analogy is astaghfirullah. It's not even good. You know?
I know where you're going.
What? What am I going to say?
If you can't say, I don't want to say.
All I was gonna say is like if you're like, for example in Libya, right? Like I'm Libyan, and let's say, I do have a kid and I'm living in Libya, and I like out of all the names I choose, I choose to name my kid like LeBron. Right? Like it's not normal. Like everybody's gonna look at me like, what are you doing, dude? Like this is not a normal name, right? Muhammad. So you say, well, I didn't want to make the connection because we're going back to the best name. Right? Muhammad, that name Muhammad was not a common name. Like when we talked about his grandfather Abu Talib naming him Muhammad, his friends looked around him, the elders of Mecca said, what are you doing? Why are you going against what your fathers used to name and you're choosing something different? Right? So it was not a common name. So the names like, that would have Abdullah in it, right? Or things like that, those were still very common, right? Because they still had that kind of fitrah almost instilled in them, right? A little bit. What other points of discussion? I like having discussions, so let's keep talking. Yes, Abdul Samad.
You said the Prophet had 3 nurse mothers, right?
Yes.
Halima and Thuwayba?
Thuwayba. Those are the 3 that we mentioned. There's more. There's one more.
When does Thuwayba come into them?
Thuwayba was before Halima Sadiya. So Thuwayba was early on, before Halima Sadiya. Right? So it was his mother first. Thuwayba had a few days, and then Halima Sadiya comes in the picture. So she comes way before Halima Sadiya, because Thuwayba used to live in the same household as Prophet Muhammad when he was younger. Now,
Did she convert, Halima?
Halima Sadiya, I believe she did convert later on, and that's why she's recalling the story of the Prophet Muhammad. I'll double check this for you, but I believe Sheikh Google, can you double check that fact for us? If Halima Sadiya, I think she did. She did become Muslim, because later on Sahaba would go and try to ask her about these things, right? And it wasn't a hard conversion for her, because she saw the blessings firsthand. It wasn't a hard thing for her to do. Nah, no questions. Sisters, any questions or points of discussion? Sheikh Google approves it? Okay. What else?
Did the Prophet form relationships with the people that he shared a breast with?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. He would actually, later on when he was older, he would make sure to visit a a lot of these women. And he would even say about Thuwayba, Ayman, like later on, a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. After Prophet, he would say, Ayman, she's like my mother. She is my mother, right? So he kept a very good relationship. And not just that, this is the beautiful thing about Islam that we learn from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is silatul raham, right? Which is a command for us as Muslims, right? Is the connection of ties, of kinship. Making sure that's always there. Na'am? And he would do that with Khadija radiallahu anha after she passed away. And that's where Aisha radiallahu anha became a little bit jealous. Why? Because Khadija, when her friends would come knocking on his house in Medina, her friends would want to come visit the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Old friends, right? They've all gone old now. And they would knock. And he would jump up. Just by the knock, he says, I know this knock. This is somebody coming from the side of Khadija. Whether it's her sister, one of her friends, I know this knock. I know it. So he would jump up, so excited. And when he would narrate things about Khadija, he would sit there for hours and they would sit there talk about Khadija. And Aisha would be hearing this and she's going crazy. Keep in mind, Aisha is much younger at this point. She's in her teens. So the jealousy is there big time. And Aisha says a word with all due respect. She says, what? She's just an old lady. That's what the hadith says. She's just an old lady. Why do you keep talking about her? She's just an old lady. Right? And he says, he sits there. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his face changes. He was a little bit hurt by that. He said, you don't understand. This woman was the first to believe in me. Like I came down running from that mountain. Nobody was with me. I came down running from that mountain when I got the wahi. And she didn't doubt me. Imagine coming down telling your wife, like I saw this creature and he said, tell me, read. And she's like, yeah, Muhammad, I believe, like I'm with you. She's the first person to accept Islam. The first person. And she was there by his side through it all. So the place she had in his heart was huge. You could never take it away. And she's the only wife he had that he never married anybody else while he was with her. Till years after she passed away. Right? So she held a very special place and he made sure that everybody who was special to her, he held them in a special place. And that's something very important that the seerah teaches us when it comes down to marriage. I might be marrying somebody, but their family is important to me now. Because that thing is important to them. Right? Their friends are important to me too. With the right limits, of course. And this is the important part when it comes down to marriage that we learn from the seerah. The Prophet ﷺ kept that connection. And even he would continue to speak about these things. A lot of the information we know today is because later on he would speak these great words about Thuwayba, about Barakah, about his mother, about Halima Sadiya, right? He would recall on these things in the future. Yes, amen. You had your hand up.
I did.
And then you put it down.
Yeah, I have a question. So, do they take only boys to nurse or the boys?
I don't know, but I believe so. I believe that's the...
I think female babies used to be killed.
Yeah, they used to get buried in the Jahiliyyah. Umar al-Khattab used to talk about that.
Because when you think about it, like in Islam, you can't marry
A nurse sister, yeah,
nurse
yeah.
sister.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if they take
A lot of those
sisters, how would you know that this woman?
Well, here's the thing. Most families would only take one child.
Huh?
Most families would only take one child. So it's very rare for you to even get more than one child.
Yeah, take one. Let's say like you took.
Oh, how would you know if that person is
let's say
okay?
you took Abdurrahman.
No, it's very well known. It's very well known. Yeah, it's not even that it used to be written that was part of it, but it's very well known because you gotta realize that the Arabs from when they were younger, they hold these traditions and they understand and they remember all these things. For example, how would the Prophet ﷺ, we talked about Thuwayba, Ayman, right? She was also the one who nursed Hamza, radiallahu anhu, who was much older than the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, keep that in mind, right? The age was not there, but that was his brother based on they both had the same nurse mother, right? These things were very, very common, and even today, like for example, back home in Libya, right? You would have people that would tell you, like, my dad would tell me like random things, like we'd go visit Libya together, and he'd be like, yeah, this person, we were both nursed by the same mom. It's a very common thing, right? Or this, and they knew that from much, much younger, you know? And even growing up, you would know it. And plus, it's the duty of the parents to let that know, to let that be known as well, you know? So things don't happen down the line. Yes, Adnan.
Does that count as his mahram? Like his nurse?
If it's a nurse mother, I don't have the full fiqh behind that, but
Pay attention.
I think if
I'm paying.
it's a boy and girl, yes.
yeah,
Then you can't marry her.
no. But it's different if they were adopted and they weren't nursed. That's different. So there's that. Surprisingly, I learned that recently that majority of the narrations we have from the Sunnah come from what's called a hadith ahad, which means basically it's a hadith that only one person ever narrated, not multiple people narrated it. Only one person narrated it, right? Because there's, in the Hanafi school, there's three different types of a hadith. You have a hadith mutawatir, which means what? Many. Means that everybody in this room heard Abdullah say this. Everybody. 30, 40 plus people heard Abdullah say this. So we have hadith mutawatir, which means that 30, 40 plus Sahaba heard the Prophet ﷺ say this. That means this person on so, all said the same thing and all relates. But then you also have hadith ahad, which means only one person narrated it, not multiple narrations. But the Hanafi school also adds one more, which is a hadith mashhur. A hadith that not 30, 40 people narrated, but not only one person narrated. It was 4 or 5 people, 6 people that all kind of came together and said a hadith. But majority of the things we learned later on from the Sunnah, actually majority of a hadith in general, there's only 330 so a hadith that are mutawatir. I think the exact number is 309. Only 309 a hadith that are mutawatir out of 20,000 plus hadith. Only 300 or so are mutawatir. The rest are all considered in that either mashhur or ahad thing. So I found that interesting, but the way now you sit there and say, well, if only one person said it, how do we take account their integrity and the truth? If only one person there isn't multiple accounts, right? And the scholars came up with a way of how to take this into consideration. They have to take who the person is. Are they considered to be a trustworthy person, or are they like Musaylim al-Kadhab? Which kind of person are they, right? Are they known for lying or not? And does this contradict with something else in the Sunnah or no? That we hear. For example, the perfect example of a hadith ahad is Abdullah bin Umar says that I saw the Prophet Muhammad before going into ruku', he would raise his hands, and coming up from ruku', he would raise his hands. There's no other hadith that follows that says that. Only Abdullah bin Umar is the only one who has narrated that followed that. Abdullah bin Mas'ud, however, said that in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, towards the end of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, I saw him not raising his hands going from ruku' and not putting them down, and not raising them going into and not raising them going up from ruku'. So you have two Sahaba, two credible Sahaba, who are saying two opposite things about the same matter. Which opinion do we take? This is becoming a usul fiqh class. Which opinion do we take?
I mean, why not both? Because people change, their habits change.
100%. Why not both? That's a great thing. Because we do today see that people raise their hands in ruku', put it down. Why not both? Abdullah bin Umar is a very credible Sahabi. So, why not both? What else? But which one, if we had to choose, which one? How do the scholars sit there and say, okay, which narration do we take? How do they decide that? The newest one? That could be. They actually do that in certain narrations. Okay, that's a good observation. The newest one, the latest one, because Abdullah ibn Umar says, I just observed it while, what's his name? Mu'az said no. I saw it in the later of his life. Towards the end of his life, I saw him not doing it.
Like abrogates.
It abrogates it, right? What else?
I think maybe,
But it doesn't invalidate it. We have to be careful with the word abrogate.
maybe the Prophet was losing strength as he got older and didn't have the energy to do it.
Could be. Maybe the Prophet ﷺ was losing strength. Yes, Hanan?
Would it depend on the chain of narration?
The chain of narration is perfect for both of them.
How weak and how strong it is?
Sanad is perfect. Both sahih narrations.
Are they both ahad?
They're both ahad because only one Abdullah ibn Umar is the only one who mentioned this. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is the only one who mentioned this.
That's why there is 4 fiqh madhabs,
Mm-hmm.
or even more. But the scholars follow these chain of narrations and interpretations, and that's why you have 4 school of thoughts in Islam, 4 fiqh madhabs.
Na'am.
Shafi'i, Hanafi, Maliki, Hanbali. They all, different fiqh issues.
Nah.
And
So-
it's not like that part of prayer is not a pillar of prayer.
So scholars, I like making you guys think because I love these topics. Scholars, what they do in this situation, they said, okay, if he truly raised his hand, if he did raise his hand, the Prophet ﷺ, throughout 23 years of prophethood, how many Sahaba do you think prayed behind him? 5 times a day, every day, how many Sahaba prayed behind him? Thousands. But only one narration said he raised his hands and he raised his hands with ruku'ah and raised his hands from sujood. Only one narration. So the Hanafi madhab says, okay, we're gonna go with the opinion that he didn't raise and he didn't drop, because if he did, then maybe other Sahaba, the thousands of Sahaba would have mentioned that. They would have corrected it if you weren't doing it in your salah. Right? So that's how they look at that. You get what I'm saying?
Could you repeat?
So they're saying, we're going to pray Isha here very soon. I promise. So they're saying that Abdullah bin Umar said that he used to raise his hand. The Prophet said when he used to go in ruku', he used to say Allahu Akbar, go in ruku'. And when he'd come up, he would say Sami Allahu man hamida and raise his hands again. Right? So the Hanafi madhab says, okay, don't you think the countless of other Sahaba that prayed behind the Prophet Muhammad, don't you think they would have observed that and narrated that? To teach the Tabi'een, to let them know that the Prophet used to do this? Why isn't there any other count of any Sahaba mentioning this? And how many other Sahaba had to teach Salah to the new Muslims coming in? Right? But there's only one hadith that mentions that. We have to look at these hadith ahad. There could be sometimes where the Prophet ﷺ has to tell specific advice to certain people, maybe to help them with khushu'. Or maybe situations to help them in their scenarios. This is not, you have to be careful. You cannot say that the hadith of Abdullah bin Umar is da'if. You cannot say that it's not true. We cannot do that. Because he's Sahabi and he's the best of generations. And the Quran tells us, you follow al-Rasul wa man ma'ahu. And those who are with him, whose are those who are with him? Sahaba. Right? Another great example would be, what opinion do you take when you see a hadith ahad? Right? Abu Huraira is the only one that narrates, the only Sahabi that narrates that you must wash a bowl or a thawb 7 times if a dog's saliva touches it. The only Sahabi that narrates that. But then later on in his life, Abu Huraira was seen doing it 2 or 3 times. He wouldn't do the full 7. So what do you do at that point? So at that point, you do what? فَإِنَّ خَالَفَ فَالْعَمْلُ بِرَأْيِهِ لَا بِرِوَايَتِهِ. You take Abu Hurairah's opinion, not the narration. You take his action that he actually physically did, not the narration he said. He's a Sahabi. He understands, and this is what he did. He did 3 times, he didn't follow the 7, even though it's a hadith sahih. But you take the opinion, you take the action, not the narration. Why? Because the action, he must have maybe somewhere along the line heard a different narration from somebody else, or asked the Prophet ﷺ and never said it again, or went to go ask more senior Sahaba and they gave him better advice, so he would later on in his life, we don't know, right? So you take the action of the Sahabi, not the narration of the Sahabi. These topics are always fun to talk about. But I think it's time to pray Isha, and it's getting late as well. Inshallah. Any other last minute questions?
You're the one who has the questions now.
I don't have any questions. Yes,
Can we cover how the Prophet ﷺ treated his nurse mothers like Halima?
later on in the seerah we might get to it. I personally studying the seerah, I still haven't gotten to that part. But maybe we will, inshallah. Hopefully we will. Is like today's time a good time to start? Just every other Friday we might have to push Isha a little bit. I mean, by next week, Isha is going to be behind 7:30.
Stop or start?
Start.
Start at 8:40.
Ya akhi.
It starts like 7:30.
7:30 Isha, because Isha is just going to keep going back. So inshallah, I can be available if you guys want me to do a lecture next week. I can be available. If not, we can stick to the 2 weeks. You guys just let me know.
2 more weeks, then you have the time change.
No.
It'll be like 6:30.
Yeah, and then by then we pray at 7 here usually, once the time change happens, right? Yeah.
So 7:30 wouldn't change. So lectures at 7:30 still wouldn't change.
Still wouldn't change?
Yeah, like
Yeah, it's still gonna be the same, yeah. I think that's the better thing to do, just stick to 7:30 and go from there. Inshallah. Khalas, then I'll keep you guys posted with a flyer, inshallah, if we're able to do one next Friday or not. Again, I really appreciate everybody coming and bringing their friends out and everything like that. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعني وإياكم بالذكر الحكيم استغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. And if somebody would like to make adhan.